Hello YouTube, this is the Monkey Effects, back with another YouTube video, and today I'm going to be focusing a lot on Trapcode Mir, which is obviously part of the Trapcode suite. So yeah, let's just dive right into it, I guess. So to start off, you're going to create your solid, make one or two lights, change the position a little, it really doesn't matter. So drag Mir onto the solid. And here we've got this randomly generated, well, not randomly generated, this is the default generation of Mir. It has its geometry plugin, also 3D geometry, yeah, basics of it. Geometry, let's go into the geometry settings. Increase the amount of vertices to increase the definition of your mesh. And I guess I should probably talk about a little bit about the history of Mir. According to Red Giant Software, which is the company that made this plugin, and you should go check out their YouTube channel. They have some really good tutorials on Trapcode Mir. But besides the point, they originally had something called Trapcode Form, which was used as an audio react slash particle slash mesh slash form slash other plugin. Basically a lot like this, except it had particles other than a mesh, and it had audio react. So basically, in order to accomplish this in Form, what people would have to do was scale down the particles and make a lot of the particles, which took forever to render because of all the particles that it had to render. Consequently, took a long time to edit, to perfect, because your screen would be pixelated half the time, and it just took forever. It was not a very efficient method of doing things. Therefore, they created actual mesh in Trapcode Mir, and works a lot more smoothly than the old form method of doing this same effect. And I might say they added a lot of stuff to make it more impressive. Let's just head into geometry now that we've been lectured by a YouTuber. You can just basically change position, derp, XYZ. Rotate XYZ, pretty obvious. Vertices, this will just increase the definition of your mesh, size X. Increases the size of the plane, but does not distort this fractal that you have going on here. Step basically creates these ribbons. It's weird. Not sure exactly what you'd use it for, but it's there. Bend, if I set the amplitude to 0, you can see what bend does. Basically, you bend it, you get a cylinder. Just pretty instinctive. Or if we set this to 2, there's something interesting I'd like to show you. When you bend it enough, you get this weird, like, Green Lantern type thing, and it just has to do with the way double sphere folds, and it's really weird. Just fun fact, interesting. We can increase the amplitude again, and we're back with our original mesh. And I think we're about done with geometry. You can increase the amplitude to just blow people's minds, but you don't want to typically increase that too much. It's like pretty interesting. Frequency, how many little fractals you have generated. Evolution basically is like fractal noise, just sort of moves the position of the bumps, not changing anything except the position. Offset does something different than changing the position. It'll just basically do the same thing as evolution does. I mean, it's different, but not really. For our purposes, it's not different. We can bump up the complexity, which just increases the amount of detail, or set the complexity to 0, which leaves you with a near two-dimensional object. Perfectly two-dimensional. So, yeah, you could use this to make some fluid effects, which are very interesting. Let's increase the complexity again. A little much. 3. Alright, and you know what? I don't know why it's so difficult for my computer to render this, but it doesn't matter. I think that's about it for fractal. Oh, bend. What's different about the bend here is that the bend will be applied after the fractal. So it'll be more of a cylinder if you do it like this, where if you do it beforehand, it'll just be like a randomly distorted cylinder and it won't look like a cylinder at all. So they threw this in. And then amplitude layer, based on the contrast of the image, it will set the amplitude to different levels throughout your mesh. So it's kind of interesting. On to shader. Default shader is set to density. You can change this to Phong, which doesn't at the moment probably looks pretty bad, but it creates makes it look solid. Typically you're going to want to set this to off, set depth buff on, and yeah, there you have it. Looks like some sort of copper mesh. I don't know. Multi-sample, that's has to do with the accuracy of the image. I'm not exactly sure how it works. But ambient occlusion, I believe that has to do with shading the object. So yeah. Then we can go, oh, I'm still in Fraps, so I'm going to close out of that. So yeah, you can decrease the specular level with the material, change the material color. Yeah, interesting. You can, if you increase the specular level, it'll make it look more like a metal, which you can see here. It looks really interesting, and if we just blow the audience's minds, that's a bit too much specular, but yeah, you get the idea. Texture, that basically applies an image onto the mesh. I don't have an image, but that's what it does. Repeater, we'll get to that a little bit later. Visibility, set the fog start to 0, and set this fog color to black. And if I rotate the camera and zoom it in, this will create a sort of terrain for me with fog. And zoom in further. Fog end, set that to like 1000. And so yeah, it's very useful for designing 3D elements. So yeah, we'll set the back up to 3000. So yeah, pretty useful stuff in this plugin. Alright, well that's about it for the very basics. Now let's get into some of the fun stuff. I was working on this to create this type of spaceship thing, which may seem ridiculously difficult to do with such a random plugin, but I'll show you how to do it in a second. If we go into Fractal, way bump up that amplitude. You're gonna want a lot. Crap. Let's go into the fog and just, there. That's good for now. If we go into lights, we're gonna want to bump up that intensity so we can see what we're working with. And so we have this ridiculously undercomplicated, hint overcomplicated mesh that crosses through itself many times. What we can do to make that sort of spaceship type thing is go into the repeater setting that I was talking about, and this is a very useful part of the plugin. If we set the instances to 90, which you didn't see anything because they're all at the exact same position because we haven't transformed each one, and rotate each individual instance by 4, wait for it to load, we get this really weird gear type thing. and it is lagging my computer. So I am going to go into these settings and decrease the geometry. That helped a little. Let's set it to 4 times. So, faster computer you have, the better it's going to be able to render these 3D objects. Yeah, really interesting shape. I guess you would call it a gear. We can go in here and translate the object, which creates a very weird. I translated it too much. It's kind of difficult to see, but it did do something. We can change the axis on which it is rotated to Y. Basically, if you don't get how this works, you have to set the rotation value and the instances to values that are divisible by 360. Typically, for the instances, you don't want to go below 90 because at that point it stops looking circular and it just sort of looks like cruddy. But here, you're pretty safe at 90. It still looks cool. So, yeah. You can create some really cool looking sci-fi buildings. You can create, like I was saying, flying saucers and stuff, which I don't know if I can get that to work at the moment, but I will try. Let's see if we go into fractal, and we set amplitude Y down to 0. Then we're gonna get this really odd looking spaceship type thing, flying wheel, don't know how to put it, but yeah. Overall I think I'm running out of time, but basically this plugin is very open-ended. There is no limit to what you can do with this plugin. I would seriously recommend, if you're into 3D animation, get this. This is an essential plugin that you're going to need for 3D animation, whether it be motion graphics or visual effects like I was just showing you. It's a very useful, creative plugin that you can use for practically anything. Like here, just completed a completely different design by simply changing a number, and not only that, but this also renders it a lot faster than it would in 3ds Max. I mean, in 3ds Max, this object would have probably taken about an hour to create, and probably would have taken about 3 hours to render it moving. But it's in After Effects, for one. You only have to render it once instead of rendering it like 4 times to get the different specular levels, and it's very user-friendly and renders a lot faster. So, I think that's yep, I have to go now, but thank you for watching this video. Hope you found it useful. If you liked it, please leave a comment, rate the video, give it a like, or even if you go over to my channel and you like other videos, then even subscribe, because that kind of stuff really does help. So, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.